Correct.
Suspended. Yeah.
So supposedly there was like a mini mutiny or a mini like we're not gonna play hard type of thing because it was a fight with an offensive player. I don't know whether it was the starting. I'm assuming it was the starting quarterback. That's what basically was put out there. Some, but nobody knows if it was the starting quarterback fighting with the backup quarterback over NIL, and the linebacker interjected, or the linebacker was fighting with the starting quarterback and the backup QB interjected on the starting quarterback side. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
we don't know the exact details on it, but there's something in there. And which leads to my bigger point is like everyone knows that this was going to happen at some point. If this is true, we don't know if it's true, because obviously that's just kind of what's been put out there. But it brings up a valid possible issue down the line, right? I think about where I played. When I played at UConn, when I was originally a running back, okay, I was a fullback, and I just think among the starting tailbacks, right? We used to use two tailbacks, right? If one guy was getting more than the other, that would have been a problem,
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just remember being in the running back room. And then when I moved to linebackers, when I moved to linebacker, that was a totally different dynamic. We used to when I became a linebacker from being a fullback, running backs were the prima donnas. Whether we were even the fullbacks were more prima donna-ish than the defensive players. When I moved to defense, we were almost resentful to the offensive players in the sense that they would get obviously the interviews, and we were doing a lot of the hard work, right? So it's interesting that this happens because it brings up a point where is this going to continue to be an issue? Even if I'm getting 20K, but you're getting 100K or you're getting a mil, and it's not an issue if everything's going well, but we lose a game. Let's call that. This is when these things happen, right? We lose a game. You go up there. You had a bad game. You're getting a million. Uh, Me as a defensive player, pissed off because you had a bad game. Now I say something to you. You say something back to me. There's a fight, right? I'm getting 20K. You're getting a mil, or you're getting a half. I mean, I don't think Hendon Hooker is getting as much as the guy that's going to come in, Nico
Right.
Iamaleava. But he's probably getting some because he had such a great year, and I'm sure
Sure.
giving him stuff.
I think
That
he signed with. I think he signed with the Mustard. Um, because remember the Vols fans threw mustard canisters at Lane Kiffin, so I think he signed a really lucrative deal with Goldens, which is funny. But
that
yeah,
is
Hooker's making money. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's an issue that is a it brings me to the staffing thing. So people were like, "Hey, there should be an NIL staffing group." Now people are starting to bring in staff there. There should be a transfer portal staffing group, right? I don't know where the rub meets the road on these things, but the truth is these are pro organizations. We can call them in the NCAA. They're in whatever league they're in. Okay, you can say whatever you want. Even though it's a college, these are pro organizations. And in a pro organization, you have person in charge of sponsorships, right? The person in charge of personnel, the person in charge of marketing, the person in charge of player development. All of these things throughout the organization in the NFL's case, $1 billion enterprise. In college football case, $500 million enterprise. It's not a billion, maybe. Some might be on their way to being a billion, but $500 million enterprise, right? So they have to have staffs in those situations. And there's no doubt in my mind that nobody is equipped at all levels to be able to handle these kind of things.
No, not yet. And I don't know, budgetary, but there's still schools digging out from COVID. We hear about these TV deals and how much money there is and all that stuff, but you got to remember that a lot of that is allocated to the university, and it depends on the university as to who's putting what back into their program. I think it's a situation where can you afford enough staff to handle this, and do you want to build that out the way you talked about? I think with the portal, it's important to have a staff that focuses on that and a separate staff that focus on high school recruiting because they really do end up merging. If you have one staff, they're going to be scrambling through the portal entries of FCS in late November FBS in early December and trying to get a head start on 2024 and close out 2023. Now, a separate NIL wing is necessary, but I don't think even that's going to help the babysitting issues that are going to have to occur because anytime there's a discrepancy in salary, there's resentment. Even when things are going well, team unity is very hard to keep constant. You know, working at a large company, obviously myself for many, many years and making more than everybody else for many, many years, there was always, resentment. There's always undermining. There was always attempts to diminish out of jealousy or whatever the deal is. People who make less are going to try to bring down people who make more. And it really defeats the team atmosphere. Now, you're going to have team players. I'm a team guy. I'm here for the team. And that's legitimately true. I don't care that I'm making, $1 million less than the quarterback. And I don't care that I'm a wide receiver and I'm making him look good by making great catches. I'm a team guy. You get those people, but human nature says there's going to be selfish people, and those selfish people may be resentful of somebody else making some more, especially if they don't perform. Now, Hendon Hooker had a great year, tremendous year. The only downfalls year the offense had this season was truly the Georgia game. I mean, they lost to South Carolina, and the defense was horrible, and the linebacker was suspended for that particular game. But it wouldn't have helped. I mean, the defense was awful. They got carved up. Hooker got hurt in that game. But the Georgia game, your number one team in the nation, you go into Georgia, biggest game of everybody's lives. The offense doesn't perform very well. Maybe the defense feels they're keeping it in, keeping them in the game, and resentment ensues after your first loss, and maybe you get a situation like that. It's going to get worse because we haven't even scratched the surface of NIL yet. The Nico Imalea, those offers, $8 million, it's made up garbage. He's not guaranteed $8 million. There's no $8 million high school quarterback. There's no company or booster club out there that's that dumb to throw that much money at them unless their name's Arch Manning, unless they have a huge national brand to that level where you're the nephew of two, Hall of Fame quarterbacks. But there's a lot of money. So, for example, Cormani McClain is a cornerback who was supposed to go to Florida. He ended up going to Miami at the last second, and he hasn't signed yet, but he committed to Miami for a better NIL deal. When he was about to commit to Florida, the sources told me the inner workings of Florida for all those D-backs were, where's mine? This kid's, rumored to be making whatever it is, $1.5 million. I've been starting here for a couple of years. Where's my money? And so those type of rumblings occurred. Then he goes to Miami, and the D-backs there all suck. They really do. There's not a good one that I've seen. And they're all like, where's my money? So the answer to them is go to the portal. You don't deserve money. You stink. But the Florida situation is like, okay, you're pretty good. We don't want to lose you to the portal. How do we handle this when this kid's rumored to be making this much money? Do you tell the DBs he's not making this much money and sort of give the details of his actual deal? Maybe, but they're not going to believe you. They're going to believe what they read. And then you're going to have a divided room where a guy like that could come into a D-back room at a school and instantly be resented and thought of as a hotshot. That happened before NIL with the 5-star kids, just because of rankings. Now it's even worse because they're making money. So this is going to continue, is my opinion.
I think a couple of possible solutions, and you mentioned it, I think last time, was the GM role, which I think Vanderbilt does with Barton, if I'm not mistaken, with Barton Simmons. I think he's quote unquote a GM, right?
Yeah, similar. Yep.
I don't know.
Player personnel guys now are GMs, so to speak.
Right. I guess it's like a player personnel person on steroids, right? So it's called a GM. Now I don't know exactly what their roles are, but I'm using GM as the term here. But someone who manages the payroll, manages the players and how they feel about that. Like, you see it in the NFL. Like if the NFL player has an issue with the coach, a lot of times he may jump to the GM because if he doesn't feel it's getting solved, because the GM can obviously has obviously a relationship with the coach. They're going to have a conversation, say, hey, listen, he doesn't feel this is being solved with you. What do we do here? What should we do here? And they kind of work it together because the GM is technically the coach's boss. Now in college, it's flipped. In college, the head coach is the GM's boss.
Right.
So that's where it's different. So I don't know if the term is GM, right?
They do call Barton a GM. I looked it up.
Yeah.
He's director of personnel, but his technical title is general manager.
Okay. Like I think that it's interesting. Is there a spot between the AD and the head coach? Now it's obviously going to be a fairly expensive spot, but is that spot a kind of GM down the line? Is that guy a spot in between the two that manages? Now, obviously, it's more for football and basketball because obviously basketball eventually, it's less people, but they probably deal with some issues as well. But is that person there to manage the football and basketball, so to speak, kind of issues where the coach can have conversations with him without having to go to the AD? Because I think the last thing the AD who manages the whole entire enterprise, even though football and basketball are 1 and 2, the last thing he wants to do is get involved every day on NIL deals, right? Like that's got to be a headache for an athletic director that has to manage donors and all these guys with big money to get the money flowing through. It's kind of like almost even a conflict. Is there a need down the line for that person kind of almost, I don't know if he's over to the coach or lateral to the coach, but someone who manages that, right? Because it's almost like the AD and then there's a huge gap to the head coach. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm not a huge structure person. Obviously, I run my company flat, right? But there's me and there's a lot of people. But in the way that this thing is structured, maybe there is a need for that person who kind of manages that process that they can all have conversations with, that players can go to separately, and that coaches can solve problems with. Because I can't see, first of all, who as a coach, that's a never-ending headache. I would love to have someone that could solve some of those issues. You know what I mean? Where we're like, hey, this is the guy's issue, and he feels comfortable going to somebody else besides me who's going to dictate whether he plays or not, right? You come to me, and I'm the head coach, and you're causing a problem, there's a chance that could affect your playing time. But that GM, that may not be the case.
Yeah, I think you're going to start seeing a lot of things staffed out in that manner. Again, can they afford, can you put a guy making 80 grand a year in that situation? Will you be able to afford somebody who, can do that? How much is he going to get paid? Where does he fall in the hierarchy? You have your recruiting personnel guy, you have your NIL guy, who's above who? Are they equal? And how do they report directly to the head coach who reports to the athletic director? But oftentimes the athletic director reports to the coach. Where that's the coach is obviously 10 times more powerful than the AD. All these things have to be worked out, and the only way to work them out is to do it by experience. You have to have these locker room fights and these disagreements to learn how to best handle it, because you're going to get true valuable information from hearing what this guy's saying, what the linebacker's saying, what the quarterback's saying, what the witnesses are saying to this